My guests today, Bill and Lisa Roitsch, have waded through the murky waters of unraveling shame and the struggles that come with addiction to pornography and infidelity. Together, they have overcome the challenges it presented in their marriage, and now they are sharing their message of hope and forgiveness to help others heal. Bill and Lisa, thank you for being here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're excited.
So tell me, how did the two of you meet?
We actually met on a blind date. So Bill's boss set us up on a blind date, and the rest was history after that.
So Bill, tell me, when did your struggle with pornography begin?
Well, I was first introduced to it as a child. And, as a child, you don't recognize, the dangers that are involved in it. In fact, growing up with, boys, you almost think you're kind of told that that's part of life and that's part of growing into a man, and that's just natural. But I was probably about 11 or 12 when I was first introduced to it, and the way I was introduced to it was finding Playboy magazines. And so, I can tell you to this day, those initial images are still x-rayed in my mind, and so they're still there. So that's how powerful they are. So it started then, and it just kind of, but fortunately back in those days it was a little bit more difficult, or there was some little bit of awkwardness or embarrassment to obtain the pornography, unlike today where it's anonymous,
it's everywhere.
and everywhere, and you can do it at your leisure.
So true.
But that's the way it started with, and it progressed into my high school, college, especially college, I would say, viewing pornography, because then there's VCRs now, and you can rent videos and things like that.
Right.
So that's where it started.
Right. So when did you realize it was becoming a problem for you?
Well, like I said, you don't think of it as a problem. At least I didn't, and I don't think most people realize that it is a problem. I would say that I've started recognizing it as a problem in our, maybe after 10 years of marriage, where I hate it when I would find myself looking at pornography and maybe masturbating or whatever, and then I would try. I'd be very upset with myself and say, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to do this again. Well, and I'd pray and start studying my Bible and thinking, okay, all I have to do is just try harder. And then, it may work for a little while, but then I'd find myself going back. And so as I continued to go back and couldn't stop on my own, I realized finally it clicked. This is not just a weakness. This is not just a flaw. This is a stronghold in my life. And there's a problem.
And that was your defining moment then?
That was the beginning of it. I would say the actual defining moment when I knew I was going to have to take some extreme measures, that I can't do this on my own. That I'm going to have to get help, because everything I've tried before never worked. So there's going to have to be something different about it. The defining moment occurred when Lisa and our youngest daughter, who was 17 at the time, were looking for prom dresses online, and they went into the browser section and saw the history of porn sites on the computer. And although we've discussed it from time to time over the years, and I'd made promises that I'm not going to do this again. I can beat this. This is just this isn't any different than someone that struggles with gossip or whatever their maybe weakness is. This is just one of those things.
Right.
I didn't recognize it as a stronghold. but when Kaylee, our daughter, found out about it, God used that. Just he really just grabbed my heart and said, "This is a bad situation. This is something that you're going to have to change in your life if you want to maintain your marriage and a relationship with or a healthy relationship with your daughters."
Right.
And so that's when the defining moment, I would say, actually happened.
Wow, powerful. So what feelings did you struggle with when you realized this really was a problem?
Well, shame was a big issue, you know, and as I look back, I can recognize that I never developed close relationships, and it's attributable to this stronghold in my life, because I could only let people get so close to me before I would put that wall up, because I didn't want them to get any closer, especially being as involved in the church as I was. There's that, hey, if they get any closer, they might see that I'm not the person that I portrayed myself to be in public, and judge me or not like me, or just to see the flaws that are actually there. And so that was one issue. Of course, another one is just recognizing that with my daughters, the character that I portray, because I preach to them, character is more important than education. You need to be a person of integrity. And the thing I would always tell them with respect to integrity was, here, my definition of integrity is you have nothing to hide and nothing to fear.
Wow.
And that whole time I'm telling them that is, I'm hiding this secret life and always afraid that someone's going to find out about it.
Right.
So looking back, I can say, I lived a hypocritical life. And
so would you say, was there a lot of guilt involved too? With the shame, or?
There's guilt, but I'm one of those people that I will feel guilty, and then I will give it to God, and I don't carry the guilt with me. I can let that go, fortunately. So that if I hadn't, that would have just compounded it.
Right.
And it would have just, I think, took me to a state of depression, and maybe whatever the destruction would have been, I don't know. But the shame, I couldn't release the shame until I fully dealt with it and surrendered it to God.
Right. When did you realize that you did need help?
It would be that defining moment, because it was at that point I knew I can continue to try to do this on my own, which has never worked before, or I'm going to have to do something different and do something extreme. And I did. From that day forward, that very day, I called 3 guys out of the church, and we sat down, and I told them the whole situation, and they were shocked. At least 2 of them were. And told them, I need somebody to hold me accountable.
Yeah.
And they have. And then the other thing I did within the next couple of days, started looking for places to go for intensives to get help.
Right.
People that have dealt with this before and gotten through it. And so when I did that, I think it was a sign to Lisa that I was really finally serious this time, and I was going to do whatever it took to get victory over that.
How did porn affect you as a husband and father, do you think?
Oh my gosh! First of all, as a husband, I'll share. That when you're struggling with this addiction, and I really don't like the word addiction. I think of it as a stronghold, but the typical term is addiction. Is you cannot connect with your wife. You really there's always a disconnect there, because you are connected with an object. Whether it's the computer. For me, it was the computer. So I'm connected with an object, and I can't connect with Lisa in a healthy way, and so we can't develop that true intimacy that God intended for us to have, of that bonding that God wants us to have as husband and wife.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And, no matter what, we may have, we may be cordial, we may get along. There's a lot of good stuff that we have, but we don't have that true intimacy. There's all surface stuff. We couldn't be vulnerable, or at least I couldn't be vulnerable with her. I couldn't be transparent. All those things that really develop intimacy and a growth in a relationship. And those things that really build trust. We couldn't do that because of this issue. I think with the girls, it was, as a father, again, it's that character issue, and I think they can see through any facade that you may have out there. And because of that character, I think I didn't have the respect that I had hoped I would have as a father.
Wow.
With the girls. But here, one good thing, here's a great thing, and shortly after that defining moment we talked about, was I went to each of the girls individually and repented before them, confessed the whole situation, and then repented. And that was a hard thing to do because I didn't know what the response was going to be.
What was their response?
The response was very positive from each of them. In fact, my fear was, they may lose total respect for me. But the opposite, I think, I gained more respect from them than before.
Beautiful. That was very courageous.
Well,
I'm sure they just really looked up to you even more, just seeing how vulnerable you had to be and how courageous.
Yeah. Well, that was one thing that I really had to learn to do, was learn to be vulnerable and learn to not hold any secrets. And since then, my relationship with the girls has been great and stronger, better than it's ever been or ever thought I could be.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Lisa and I. Now, here, the whole purpose of us being here is to give hope to others who are in a similar or same situation that we were in, and because there is hope.
Yeah.
There's hope, and we've gotten to the point. I'd like to, when we mentor people, we'd like to tell them that we want you to get to a point where you can celebrate every day of your marriage rather than just endure it.
That's
Because
good.
we endured it for a long time, but now we can celebrate every day.
Now you can really live.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, let's talk about you. How did Bill's struggle with porn stir up emotions in you?
They stirred up a lot of emotions. I came from a very broken background and had a lot of rejection and abandonment issues from my childhood. My father divorced and left us, and so, as a young girl, I was wanting acceptance and affirmation from a man because I didn't get it from my father. And so, just longing for acceptance and being married. I was very young when we got married, and wasn't too far into the marriage when I found out about his pornography struggle. And so it kind of just poked the bruise of that rejection and abandonment that I had, because I never felt like I was enough, and I didn't understand why I wasn't enough, and that why he had to go and look at other women. So it just continually validated that I was rejected and that I wasn't accepted or approved, and so I always kind of felt less than. So it stirred up a lot of yucky emotions that I had never dealt with from my childhood, and so I just stuffed them, really. And we started having children, and you get involved with the busyness of raising little children, and we have 3 girls, and so you just stuff a lot of things, and you hope that they will go away, but they don't. There's a book out there that I read that is called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die, and that is so true.
So what transpired for you personally and emotionally after you and Bill married?
Well, again, I just never felt like I was validated as a woman and as his wife. And I think the number one need of a woman and a wife is security. And I could never really feel safe because I think in the back of my mind I was always worried he would leave me because I knew he was viewing pornography. And there is a progression and you hear about it, and so it would always threaten my sense of safety and security as is he going to leave me for another woman, you know, because I know he's looking at other women. And so it was just always doubt in my mind. I always you felt like we were walking on eggshells and just not very stable in our relationship because we weren't connecting. I think that's the biggest thing that we like to share with people is that pornography usage or pornography addiction really at its base is an intimacy disorder, and you're not able to properly bond as a husband and a wife the way we're designed to because there's always a third party in the relationship, and there was no intimacy, there was no deep connection. I didn't know what his deep dreams were or the things that he struggled with because he wouldn't share any of that because of all the shame and just wouldn't let me inside. And so, you know, it was just challenging, very challenging to grow in a relationship when those walls are present.
So it was kind of that suppressing of
Right.
the emotions of it again.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what was the breaking point for you before your marriage almost ended in divorce?
Well, the breaking point was my own selfishness. So what makes our story unique is usually when you hear about men or women that are addicted to pornography, usually what happens is infidelity happens and it progresses outside of viewing online. But for our situation, I was the one that chose to be unfaithful, and it was selfish. You know, my needs, I felt like my needs were not being met inside this marriage, and I had needs. We all have needs. And so when a temptation came, it was an opportunity for me to become validated and accepted and approved by a man, something that I wasn't getting at home. And so I engaged in that, and of course Bill did not know, and I hid it, but I was miserable, and I was living a lie, and I was having to cover up a lot of things, and that's not who I am in my core. And so I just got to the point where I just couldn't manage it anymore. I couldn't tolerate living two different lives, and so I went to him and I confessed, and I told him everything, and so that was one big moment in our relationship.
Wow. Would you say at that point it was a defining moment for both of you together as husband and wife?
Yeah. And you know, I didn't say this earlier, but you know, the other part of the defining moment was realizing how much I had hurt Lisa, and the pain that I had caused her, and the wounds that I had caused because of my actions and my selfishness, and so, you know, defining moment was, again, I can't undo that. All I can do is from this point forward, you know, is be a better husband and do what I can to rebuild trust in our relationship. And so whatever was necessary to really start to form that bond and that intimacy that had never been there before.
So Lisa, what has been, or when was your defining moment to seek your own healing?
To seek my own healing, I learned how to put up a boundary, and that was something that I had never really done in our marriage. If you would have walked up to me and told me that I'd had poor boundaries, I would have not understood what you meant. But there was this element of codependency in our relationship, and I, in essence, enabled him to continue in his cycle of junk because I wasn't facing my own stuff, and I wasn't really loving myself enough to say, this is unacceptable. I can't continue to do this. And so it wasn't until I was able to get to a point where I realized his junk was triggering my junk, and my junk was triggering his junk. It's a cycle, you know. It's a dance that you get into as in a marriage, a relationship, and And so I really drew a line, and I said, you know what, I think, and this is what worked for us. I'm not advocating this for anybody else, but for us, I just knew I felt like we needed a separation, because I needed to work on my healing and he needed to work on his healing. And we never discussed divorce. That wasn't an option for us, but I did believe a separation would be very necessary for us, because I was being triggered a lot by, the things that he does, and I'm sure vice versa. And in the midst of that, Bill came and surprised me a couple of days later after I said that I really wanted to go move out and just work on myself. And he said that he had registered for a 3-day intensive retreat for men that struggle with pornography addiction and sexual brokenness. And it was a shock, because he had never taken those steps before to validate what was going on was real and that he couldn't manage it anymore. And so I said, okay. So we moved forward in that and paid the money, and he went. And we are big advocates of, not everybody needs an intensive retreat, but for Bill it really worked.
Life-changing.
Very life-changing. And he came back from that 3-day weekend a completely different man. A night and day difference. He had to look at his own demons. He had to look at the things that were causing him to turn to pornography. And in doing that, he got a lot of freedom in his soul, and he was able to come back and understand how he had hurt me. And then it began us on a journey of really talking about very deep things that we had never talked about in all the years of our marriage. And so we just had lots of conversations. I felt it was necessary for me to resign from my job. I had a full-time job, so I resigned from my job and stayed at home. And really, we worked on our marriage for the first time in all these 20-plus years. And it really catapulted us into a place where we could talk about things that we both had struggled with in our childhood and that were resurfacing in our adult life, and why we were making the choices we were making. And I will just say, for Bill, we do mentor and counsel a lot of couples that have infidelity. And Bill, from the very moment I confessed having an affair, he forgave me openly and unconditionally. He didn't have to do that. I certainly didn't deserve his forgiveness, but he made a choice. And he just said, we're going to put this in the past and we're going to move forward. And he never punished me. He never blamed me. He never flung it back up in my face. He never called me names. He just was like, we're gonna move forward and we're gonna work on our healing together. And with that kind of an attitude, it was easy for me to move forward with him and forgive him and work on the actual act of healing and recovery, which is what we both wanted. But if we would have stayed in that, I love what you said, it's murky water. If we would have stayed in that unforgiveness, well, you've hurt me and she's hurt me, and if we would have stayed there, we couldn't be sitting here today, and we wouldn't be able to help other people say that it's possible to recover from infidelity. It's possible to have healing from a sex addiction. And so Bill is really my hero. Because there's a lot of men that would not forgive their wives for going outside of their marriage. Pornography is accepted because it's in your home and you're not going outside the marriage. But what I did breached every vow that I made on our wedding day. But Bill has shown me what unconditional love looks like through the act of forgiveness. And the beautiful thing is that our own daughters have gotten to see that. So when Bill went and confessed his sin, I went and confessed to them and told them what I had done. Because whatever's at the top will trickle down. So there was stuff at the top of Bill and I, and it was trickling down to our children. And they knew something wasn't right, and yet we had this facade of going to church and pretending like we had it all together. And so going to them in humility and brokenness and just telling them, we're not perfect, we have failed. But we are striving to work in forgiveness and healing, and it's been a powerful, powerful thing for our children. They're all adults now, they're grown, but hopefully we have modeled for them forgiveness and unconditional love, and that's what we've wanted to do all along.
Yeah, maybe even confess that we have, because, I mean, with the offenses that we both have caused or performed to each other, and the forgiveness that we both demonstrated, it's something that's not just something that we're preaching something that we're not living.
Yeah.
So they recognize it.
Our middle daughter said, all my life you've preached the gospel to me, Mom, but today you lived it in front of me. And that's really what the gospel is. It's all about love and forgiveness. And because none of us are perfect, and we all make mistakes. And we're just broken vessels living a life and trying to have connection with one another.
But in any relationship, forgiveness is crucial.
Yeah.
If you're going to grow with one another, and so without it, you wallow in those murky waters, and who
They
wants to
become
do that?
toxic. They really become toxic.
Who wants to do that?
Yeah.
This recovery or this growth that we've experienced, this journey since we began the reconciliation process and the recovery, it's been fun. We've enjoyed it. So when you get to know
It's been
each other-
fun. Did you ever think you would say that?
No, marriage is so great, and when you do it God's way.
Yeah, that's the key. If your marriage is falling apart, it possibly may be that you're not doing it God's way. And that's what we learned. We weren't doing it God's way. We were hiding secrets. We were lying to one another and trying to pretend that we were people that we weren't. And that doesn't work. And eventually, it will crumble and fall. And it did. But the good thing is we had a foundation, and it was easy to rebuild our marriage because of the foundation that we had laid, 28 years ago when we made a commitment to get married.
How are you helping other couples today?
Well, one thing we mentioned, we do marriage mentoring. We also, we're involved in. We're involved in the intensive program that I went to. I guess not formally or officially, but I mean we communicate and correspond with them, and if there's things we can do to help, or we do refer them to other people that are struggling and need to go to intensive.
We teach a marriage class for distressed couples that are dealing with a lot of these issues.
Correct. Yeah, we do that, and also I've taught recovery programs for men with sex addictions. And one thing that people don't recognize or realize sometimes is, the man that's struggling and he needs to go get help, but at the same time you can't just leave the wife there without a support system as well, because the man, she's got wounds that she needs to deal with as well. And if the man gets well, comes home, and she hadn't dealt with her wounds, there's still that disconnect and that separation and trauma that needs to be healed as well. So Lisa taught a class for women whose husbands have been where I was.
Yeah, support groups are really crucial for the journey of healing of any type of sexual brokenness, we feel. So we were privileged to be able to lead several support groups in our local church, and just create an environment for people to feel safe to talk about these things. Early on in our marriage, when we tried to get help, no one was really talking about this in the 90s. And, I was told everything from just give your husband more sex, then he won't have to look at pornography, to people just not even wanting to talk about it at all with us. And I felt very alone. And so I think for me personally, I want to be able to get the message out that there are resources today. There are support groups, there's intensive retreats for healing for men and women, because women are involved in pornography now more than ever, and it's growing. And so there's hope because of the resources that are available in the day and age that we live in. And technology almost destroyed our lives, but today it can be something that's very beneficial because there's so many things available online that can help couples. And so we really want to be able to let couples know, women and men, that there's there's things out there that can help you go through this. You're not alone.
Exactly, because I think that's what probably many men and women feel, is they feel alone and they don't have
And
anyone
hopeless.
to talk to,
Yes.
and hopeless.
Well, there's such a stigma about sexual sin in our society that,
Especially in the church.
especially in Christendom, no one wants to talk about it. And so you just, again, you stuff it, you don't talk about it, and you push it under the rug, and it's not healthy. And so we're kind of,
But it's an epidemic.
Yes,
I mean,
it is an epidemic.
It's out of control in the church. And the statistics alone will, verify what a major issue it is, and it needs to be dealt with. And I think churches are finally coming around to start, recognizing the danger and how big of an issue it is, and starting to come up with some programs and things to really help people. I think before they maybe the advice that people would get when they'd come to the pastor or somebody with this issue was, oh, you just need to pray harder, or you need to pray more, study your Bible. Well, that's really not helping as much as I know the intent was always good, but there's a bigger issue. One thing we learn as we've gone through this journey is it may start off as a moral issue, but it becomes a neurological issue. You program your brain, or your brain becomes programmed as you do this over and over and over, and these neural pathways are formed, that it's just a coping mechanism that is triggered by certain events or certain things. There's multiple types of triggers that can set you off. And so it's not really a moral issue, it's not a sex issue, it's a brain issue. And so when Paul says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, I think that's a literal statement that you need to reprogram your brain.
So true.
And intimacy with Christ is the key. I mean, without that, you can't have the recovery. And so you do have to go through the Bible study and learning to reprogram and put these new ideas, or replace the lies that you believe with the truth. But it's not just that. You have to recognize that it is a brain issue and a neurological issue that needs to be changed.
that was one of the most fascinating things for me when we started on this journey. We've read so much, but the neurological and physiological and biological aspect for someone that's engaged in pornography is mind-blowing, and it literally will rewire your brain, and the neurotransmitters, apart from a miracle, or once they're wired, neurons that fire together wire together. And so if you think of it as a map, you're actually mapping your brain to respond to the chemicals that are released during the viewing of pornography. So endorphins and dopamine and serotonin, which are what people are actually addicted to. If you have like a drug addiction, you're not really addicted to cocaine or heroin. You're addicted to the chemicals that are released in your brain that are produced because you put the drug in your body. And so for someone using pornography, you get this massive dumping of dopamine and endorphins and serotonin, and it is a high. And so when stress comes into your life, you want to get out of that stress, and so you look for a way to relieve the pain. Pain will always pursue pleasure, and so for some people, looking at pornography brings a high to their brain, and it helps alleviate stress and the frustration and pain of life, and so that's their drug of choice. So you can't just tell someone using pornography, just stop, just like you couldn't tell a cocaine addict or a heroin addict, just stop. It is a brain disorder.
The dopamine released through viewing pornography is 5 times stronger than the dopamine that is released through morphine.
Wow.
So overcoming the addiction to pornography is much more challenging, much more difficult than it is for an alcoholic or even a drug user.
Yeah. So the really cool thing is when Bill was going through the initial stages of his recovery and renewing his mind, he would tell me that he could actually feel his brain tingling.
Wow.
And I really believe that that was a physical sensation of the neural pathways in his brain being rerouted through fasting of pornography and through abstinence
we had a
yeah
60-day abstinence.
60-day abstinence, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of tools that are available to help people today.
So I was just the problem with this is, like you said, it's a coping mechanism. So pain pursues pleasure. So what you need to recognize, or what we all need to learn to recognize, is if you're going through pain, you're going to pursue pleasure no matter what. So what that pleasure is needs to be something that's healthy, rather than something that's unhealthy. And so, unfortunately, I chose an unhealthy way to overcome the pain that I was going through. And so now it's changed.
Beautiful story.
It's hard work, and that's the other thing we want to tell people. It's not an easy road. It takes a lot of intentionality, it takes a lot of focus, and there are setbacks, and it's not something where you just snap your fingers. We always talk about, when we mentor couples, sometimes you feel like they want you to just wave a magic wand and fix their marriage. And I say, it's hard work. It's hard work. There's a lot of tears and there's a lot of pain when you have to talk about things that are hurtful, but it is possible to get to the other side. And if you're willing to do the work, I promise you'll get the results that you want. And all of us, the results is we want to have an intimate connection with the people that we love.
Right.
Because that's what we're wired for. We're wired for intimacy. We're wired to make connection with other human beings. That's part of why we enjoy being together, Very few people can live a life of being a hermit,
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a beautiful story, Bill and Lisa. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story and being brave.
Thank you for allowing us to come and share our story.
Yes.
You're welcome. If you or a loved one are struggling in your marriage with pornography or infidelity, you can reach out to Bill and Lisa Roitsch with Power of His Love Ministries. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week.